This is the Real Estate Shop, where each episode will bring you a top industry expert to share their current programs or projects that are making an impact in our communities today. Be sure to check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
In this episode of The Developers, we had the privilege of tag teaming Ernst Valery, co-manager of SAA EVI, based out of Baltimore, and Adrian Washington from Neighborhood Development Corporation, based in Washington, D.C. Let's join in.
Morning, everyone. So, we have an opportunity here to talk to two distinguished developers, Adrian Washington and Ernst Valery. Would love to just understand, how did you guys get into the business and how did you develop your firms?
Thanks. I'll tell you my story, and it's really, I think it's probably an unconventional path. I went, unlike Ernst, I went to undergrad. I got out, I worked in corporate America. I got my MBA. I worked in management consulting, and I had absolutely zero, I wouldn't say zero interest in real estate, but, no professional relationship to it. And so I'd say that's by the time I was 30. I mean, I really, had no idea end up where I am today. And it really came to real estate as almost like by a hobby. I had bought an old brownstone in Washington, D.C., and fell in love with the process of neighborhood change, of the physical aspect of taking like an asset and taking it from something that was not useful to something that was beautiful and functional and created, value, both neighborhood value and economic value. And I was in consulting. I hated that. I was like, what am I going to do? And I was like, I would, be, going, flying, out of town and coming back at like 7 at night, be up at midnight, sanding floors and things like that. And so I was like, this is what I want to do. This was my passion. And so I really ended up just turning a hobby, working on my own house, into a career that's, lasted, for decades now.
Wow.
So how did you all build your development teams and also maybe overcome some of those initial challenges by, having to post your own guarantees? How were you able to overcome those early challenges?
I'll start with your second question. I'm still posting personal guarantees. I don't know if someone knows how to get over that obstacle. It's funny. I had negotiated a loan and I got the term sheet a couple of weeks ago, and there was no personal guarantee on it. And I was like, yes, this is great, and I was really happy, and I signed and got off. And then the loan officer came back literally yesterday in the email and said, oh, I forgot one little thing. We need a personal guarantee. Can I get your personal financial statement? So I have not gotten over that. I love to hear stories of people. I mean, not every loan I do is personal guaranteed, but almost all of them are. So I'd love to hear stories of people who have overcome that. I mean, in terms of putting together a team, I think that real estate development is not kind of, at least in my experience, kind of like a very kind of organized business progression where you can project, this year my sales are going to be X, and then next year they're going to be 1.5X. You can kind of forecast out. It's very episodic. It's very entrepreneurial. So typically what I find is that developers, they're working on projects. They get very busy. They get more or less confident depending on the environment and their portfolios. And they get to a point, they try to keep things lean, but you get to a point where either you say, we just can't do it, we're just bursting at the seams, or you get to the point where, I see opportunity. I want to go into this new market, or there's this new product type, I need this expertise. And then you make that, move. And what I've tried to do over the years is, not be so reactionary, is to start kind of looking for talent way before you need it. And so, right now we kind of constantly kind of keep job postings open and people respond, and I'll say, hey, actual job is filled, but, you have an interesting resume, let me talk to you. Or, you'll do events, and that's been tough during the COVID years. But I mean, prior to that and hopefully going forward now, you go to events, you meet people, and you just take little notes to yourself. You say, oh, this person, seemed kind of interesting of a background, let me keep an eye on them. Let me maybe do a coffee with them. And even if you don't sort of need that hiring person right now, you never know. Someone could leave, someone's moving out of town, you need to fill that position. Or like I said, you got an opportunity, maybe you land a deal and you need expertise in new markets tax credits. And you're like, oh, well, Lisa, I remember talking to her a couple years ago, does new markets tax credits, let me check them out. So you really got to just be, opportunistic, flexible, and you need to look ahead.
Yeah, I'm taking notes, actually. It's interesting because we tend to want to stay lean rather than um, uh, be bursting at the seams because you can't really get hurt when you're lean. Right? And you could get hurt if you're bursting at the seams because just watching other people that have gone and they, you don't really need 100 people to have a development company. 5 to 10, 15 really great people. But then I also agree you have to stay ahead because then a big project comes and you don't want to be scrambling for that big project. But we tend to stay lean and it does make sense to constantly look out for talent. And on the personal guarantee front, the best we've been able to do is get down to like 25% of the outstanding loan we would personally guarantee. And that's for like a fully stabilized product. And until you get there, you're on the hook for it. And so I don't know any other way. And so you have to have liquidity and you have to have a balance sheet. That's the biggest thing about development before you can kind of scale. You need to get to a point where you have that balance sheet. And, you also need equity as opposed to debt because equity can be added to your balance sheet essentially.
And I don't know how many people will have that conversation that, pretty much say, look, you got to go get a joint venture partner because you don't have the liquidity and you don't have the balance sheet. Guess what? You're just not going to get it done. But that's just folks trying to break into the business. It's not easy. So you all been in business for a while. What projects have you done? And do you have any particular ones that are your favorites?
Well, I'll start. I mean, we were just counting the other day, we've done 47 projects. So that's quite a bit. And, it's when you talk about what's your favorites, it's kind of like your children, not that I have 47 children, but, it's like they're all, hopefully projects that there's something in them you like and that, you may like one for, more reasons than another, but that, hopefully you've chosen your projects well and, you look back and you're very happy. Because I think that's really what drives people to be developers is that sense of creation of looking back and saying, I did that. Like I'm sitting here in my office, which is a building that we did. I'm looking across the street at another building we did. And, those are just senses of accomplishments that you don't get in a lot of other fields. And so I like that. I mean, I would say in terms of favorites, like I said, there's none that are favorites, but there are certain ones that were kind of milestones for me. I mean, I remember kind of the first like double-digit condo project we did on a project at Chapin Street. I remember like looking at the building across the street, which was at the time the largest condo building we did and an old industrial warehouse. And so our first kind of like real loft style type of thing. I remember like the first affordable housing project that we did. So I think there are kind of like milestones along the way. But I think every project I look at something, like one had great design, one had a really great, creative kind of capital stack. Another was kind of, I really liked the design, the units were really laid out. Another was, maybe the commercial tenant that we brought in was somebody really unique and we helped them build their dream. So you find sort of different elements of every project that is something that that hopefully you're happy about.
I would agree. The first are always the best. Like my first row house, I remember every detail about that project. The first multifamily, so the first are the ones that you remember. And then you really try to create for yourself, a value system. Like when I develop, these are the things that I'm going to do. And these are the things that we value in our buildings. And, we really focus on the people and we really focus on urban areas and neighborhoods that have, typically been ignored and not invested in. And we find that racism has a lot to do with a neighborhood that doesn't get investment. It's because, the market doesn't like who lives there, not necessarily because the project itself doesn't work. We were able to do a project behind Penn Station in Baltimore City. And so think about Penn Station in like New York, or Penn Station anywhere, you would want that piece of property. But in Baltimore, we were rookie developers, but we got this project because we valued the people that was in that community. And, And we're finding that all over the place. We're doing a project in Richmond, California, and it's right next to Amtrak and the BART train in the Bay Area. And no one values it as much, and it's because of the people. And so, you know, I like the projects, but I like what they stand for. The fact that we're trying not to gentrify people of color out of these really valuable communities.
And when you talk about your pipeline, Ernst, you just mentioned a project in Baltimore City and another one in California. How do you choose what markets you're going to go into, and how do you present opportunity? How do you look at it?
We're not really a place-based developer, so we don't say we're only DC. And I've got friends that only develop in DC, and now they're trying to branch out in other places. We go to different markets because I truly believe that you have to be in different markets, because development is such a, you can get held up for 6 years, 10 years on certain projects. And so if you're not in different markets that don't have the same politics as the other market, you're going to find it very hard to have longevity, right? And like if you get the wrong administration in the market that you say is your market, well, that's 4 or 5 years that you're not developing anything. But the chances of not having the wrong administration, of continuing to get your projects done in multiple markets. So that's one reason we're in different markets. The other reason is because we want to be in urban markets, and we want to kind of get our development approach out there, especially in communities of color. And there's communities of color in all the markets that we're in.
Awesome. Adrian, how do you look at your opportunities in your pipeline?
We are sort of that developer that's sort of locally focused. I mean, we've done up, through our first 15 years, to say all of our projects were in DC, and we've expanded a bit beyond that. We're doing some projects in Maryland now, and I definitely get the advantages that Ernst are talking about. What we tried to do is diversify. I mean, we do a lot of public-private partnerships, like I think most Black developers do, but we also do sort of market rate that aren't involving the public sector. So that gives us some kind of flexibility. We do different product types. We do for sale, we do rental, we do affordable, we do market rate, we do commercial. So it gives some diversity. But I mean, I'm definitely hearing what Ernst say. I would like to be in other markets. It's something we've talked about for a while. Just seems like something we just never get around to doing it. And so I think it is a way to diversify. I think it's a way to kind of also have more fun, add more variety. I mean, I think that you can kind of work in the same markets, and particularly if you're dealing with government officials, even though administrations change, you're dealing with sort of the same structures. And I think it'd be fun to go and other places, and I go and visit them, and I talk to other developers there, and I do kind of pick up like a different perspective and sort of like a refresh. And I think they'd like to do that. So maybe next year is the year we actually get around to really doing that.
Awesome. And with all this development going on in your portfolios, how do you manage your personal life? And a sidebar to that, Ernst, as you grew from Baltimore to other markets, like how did you set your organization up to be successful in those markets? And also, how did you kind of like convince your wife, about this vision that you have to be a coast to coast?
Yeah, I don't know if I've convinced her yet. I travel a lot, and, you just have to set certain boundaries. And so for me, I don't travel on the weekends. So Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I tend to put the phone away, and I'm really present when I am with my kids those days. And I try to coach, and I try to be at all the, lacrosse games, the soccer games, and it's really their days, right? And so Friday night is always pizza night. We watch a movie, and then we start Saturday together, and we spend the whole day. So by the time Sunday night rolls around, they're kind of sick of having me around, and I can get back to traveling again. But, you really have to have these different compartments. And when you're with family, you have to be really intentional, because, kids grow up fast. And then you also have to leave space to have a real relationship with your partner, your spouse. And so, making sure that, we have the Netflix thing that we do together, and those things are really important as well. And, at the end of the day, setting up our company, a lot of our company is really either based in our office in Miami or our office here in Baltimore. So they don't do as much traveling. Maybe they'll go for requisition. So they do more like once a month traveling. It's really, I do a lot of the, every week type of traveling to maintain relationships. And, this business is about relationships. And so you don't want to just go to folks when you need something from them. And so you want to be present and you want to maintain great relationships. And I would also say an argument for Mr. Washington to be in different markets is the knowledge that he has. A lot of these secondary and tertiary markets, they don't have Black and brown developers that have that kind of knowledge. So in terms of joint venturing and partnering with folks in other markets, it's what we need so that we can change the entire, because I always look at it as the effective majority in any city in America is really women, minorities, and immigrants. And we get treated like second-class citizens in all of these cities. And if we had the mentorship and we had the partnerships that allowed us to get into development and build great development companies, I think our cities would be better off. So that's one argument for having Mr. Washington travel and do projects with folks like me in different markets.
Okay, well, no, that's great food for thought. I hadn't thought about it that way, but I think that's great. No, I definitely agree with you. In terms of setting boundaries and being intentional about it. I mean, my kids have passed the point where they need dad around that much, but I think that being an entrepreneur is really tough, and you work like long hours and you work late into the night. But I think the advantage is that, you have some schedule flexibility. So when my kids were younger, I mean, I was there for their sporting events and their plays and things like that. I mean, if I, had to leave the office at 3 to get to, the soccer game by 4, I did it. And then, I was there. And then, when they went to bed, then, I worked a couple hours and did my emails then. But you're right, I turned off my phone and focused on it. And I think kids really appreciate it. I mean, they don't always, come up and say, "Oh, you're a great dad. I'm glad you're here." But, they're glad you're there. And so I'm definitely glad I had those experiences. And I feel like I was very much there for my kids, and probably not as much there for my wife as she would say if she were on this podcast. But now the kids are older. I'm spending more time with her as well. So it's, you got to balance. So that as an entrepreneur, you get super passionate about what you're doing. You want to build it. You want to be there. It's like, that intoxicating. And so you do have to just, put your phone in your pocket, turn it off, be there, and then go back later on.
Good notes.
Wow. Yeah, it's a real balancing act. Yeah, based on what you guys have done, which is considerable, where would you both like to be in terms of yourself and your firms, like, say, within the next 5 years?
I mean, I certainly have goals. I mean, just from a personal perspective, I'm getting to the point in my life where, I'm not ready to hang it up or retire or anything, but I definitely want to, be more of a, sort of a thought leader, more of a visionary, less hands-on. I've been certainly transitioning towards that over the years. And so 5 years from now, I certainly hope that transition is complete where, I'm just relationships, setting a vision where I have a super capable team that's handling all the day-to-day stuff, and I'm not really thinking about that. So that's my personal ambition. As terms of a company, I do want to, be in other markets. I want to, we're in the process of raising our first institutional equity fund. So our goal is $100 million. I certainly expect to have that done in a lot less than 5 years. And to be in a position where, we are, we're a player, and that we are, you know, financially stable and, can commit our own money and that, and then also then to, complete our transition, into being a mission driven company. I mean, we've always been a mission driven company, but when you start out and small, you're trying to make payroll. I mean, you're trying to keep the lights on, you're trying not to go broke. And I think, you have to, over time get out of that mindset and say, okay, you always, you're an entrepreneur, you always want to be like more successful, but there comes a point you have to say, I've been successful. I'm not like the biggest company in the world, but I've been successful, and now I can shift my attention to being more mission driven, to, help people in communities. Like Ernst said, be like a mentor to the next generation of Black developers and spend more time doing that. So I certainly want to have a lot more of my focus on that part of the mission and a lot less of my focus on like the nuts and bolts of running a company.
Yeah, and we're still in like the building phase. We're just about 3,000 units, and it would be great. When we had like 100 units, it was like, let's get to 1,000 units, and then you get to 1,000 units, and it's like, can we do two? Now we're at three. In the next 5 years, we'd like to get over 5,000 units, and maybe get to 10, because the way capital works in some of these large projects, before, if we did a 100-unit project, that was great. Now, if it's 250, 500, so we could probably get to 5,000 to 10,000 units in the next 5 years. And then it's really, once in 5 years, we want to start to redefine what success means to us. And on our side is, how do we raise capital so we can invest equity in that next generation? Like, how do we develop a bench? And how do we normalize people that look like the folks on this panel, women, minorities, and immigrants? How do we normalize us being in development? And so I really define that as having equity that can be invested in folks at really small levels, because if you come out of school, even if you have a master's in real estate from like Columbia or Cornell, you're not ready to do what Mr. Washington does, right? You got to show me you can do that first row house. And so that's why we've developed this AQUO fund to level the playing field and create a gateway for people who have gone out and gotten the degrees. But now, how do we, put you through training day and Denzel style, and figure out can you do it or not?
All over again, would you do anything differently?
I do. I mean, you got to sort of split that question in two. I mean, I have no regrets. I'm very happy, very blessed with both professionally and personally. So I have zero regrets about anything I did, because whenever you unravel, whenever you say, if I did this, then this wouldn't happen. So I have no regrets. But I mean, if I was to advise someone, like, how do you get into development? I mean, I think there are, I do it way differently than I did. I mean, I bootstrapped my way up. I mean, I got into a field where I knew absolutely zero about, and just dove in and made every mistake in the book, and, got lucky, there are dozens of mistakes I made that could have, like, killed the dream, and just got lucky and worked hard, and had, good people around me. So it's good. But I mean, if I was to advise someone young wanting to be a developer, I mean, I would say, I'd say go work for a large developer first. I mean, it's something I didn't do, but I think there are just so many kind of like best in class people, like a JBG or Hines, or, like a Hoffman, kind of folks like that. I would have go work there 2 or 3 years, see how that works. Maybe you like it. Maybe, like, you're on the path there and that's environment for you. That's great. But if not, I then transition to, more entrepreneurial environment, like maybe, my firm or Ernst, or, to see how more entrepreneurial environment does it. Like, how do you do it without all those resources? How do you do with all that, without that kind of, national brand name? See how someone else did it. And then again, at that point, assess where you are. Sort of say, hey, this is a place is great. It's I feel like home here. I feel like I can really move up and be a principal in this firm. This is great. But then if you're at that point where you still don't feel that way, then you're prepared to start your own thing. And then, you've got that resume, that track record, that training of how the big boys do it. You've kind of looked over the shoulder of someone like us and see, okay, here's how an entrepreneur does it. And then you're prepared to go out. And, I think, I could have started at a sort of much higher level if I had done that, and, avoided a lot of the pitfalls. And I think it would have been a smoother experience, frankly. So, I don't have, like I said, I don't have regrets of what I've done, but I mean, I think that there are a lot of ways you can avoid, mistakes that you make if you just sort of start out and say, and I know how it is when you're young, you're like, I got to get started like right now. It's like, damn, I'm 30 and I haven't, started my business yet. And you look back when 30 is a long way in the rearview mirror, and you're like, you got plenty of time to do all that stuff. So, don't have to be in such of a rush.
I think that's really great advice. I mean, I don't regret anything, but being a little bit more patient, I would be a little bit more patient with certain things. Because I was that 22-year-old, 23-year-old thinking that, the sky is falling and I need to do things more and more and more. And you kind of rush through. But then, part of it is those pitfalls help define you, right? They, if you get through them, they help kind of strengthen your whole approach, and you become better for it. But you don't necessarily have to go through those things if you're a little bit more patient and you get more mentored. I wish I was more mentored, because I was I just started doing it on my own, and made a lot of mistakes. But small mistakes don't kill you. It's
yes. Well, I made small mistakes, medium mistakes, and big mistakes. I definitely hear you, but you're right. Those experiences form you, and they make you tougher. And it's a two-sided coin, because if you don't have that kind of ambition to do foolish things, then maybe you never do it. But it is a different perspective. I was talking to one of my younger employees yesterday, and he said, "Oh, I got a birthday coming up," and I was like, "Oh, okay, well, and he said, "Well, he's turning 29 like next week," and he's like, "Yeah, man, I'm like starting to worry that I have all these things I wanted to accomplish and I haven't done it yet." I'm like, dude, twice as old as you, you got plenty of time to get stuff done. So it's just slow down and appreciate what you got right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cherish the moment, right?
Yeah.
So we appreciate it, guys. Thanks for your advice. I think this was all good. Appreciate the gift of time.
Another day at the shop. Content they can't get anywhere else.